Hello and welcome. I'm Carly from Soundsight Studios in Austin, Texas, and today we're going to take a flip through tour of the Modern Witch Tarot deck. It's a great deck that I highly recommend for people, so let's check it out. Starting with the Major Arcana. Here's the Fool card. This character is ready to go try something new. She's optimistic with her heart lifted, and she may be about to step off of this cliff, but who knows, maybe she can fly. She's willing to find out. This dog will let her know if anything serious is going to happen. She's ready for a new beginning. I love that she has this little iPod here. It's so cute and classic. The Magician is a card that represents the old Hermetic axiom, as above, so below. All the flowers on the border represent her ability to manifest and to use the resources around her to solve problems, to innovate, and to be inventive. She has all the tools that she needs. Now it's just a matter of really making a plan and putting everything into action. She even has the energy. The High Priestess. Traditionally, the card represents intuition, really listening to what your inner voice is telling you, especially if that inner voice is a result of connection to your ancestors or your female lineage. There's usually water in the background, which represents her access to the subconscious mind, which is typically portrayed as calm and placid water, not disturbed, not aggravated, but calm. The moon is a symbol that's represented up here with her crown. Typically it's known as the crown of Hathor, which represents her divine feminine connection, and it's the symbol of the triune of maiden, mother, crone. It's the waxing, the full, and the waning moon. But in this card, she's actually wearing that crown, and it looks more like a headband, which is really cute. She sits between these two pillars, which are a representation of polarity. She's balanced in the center, and she can see both sides of an argument or a judgment. Again, it represents her wisdom, because these pillars are a callback to King Solomon from the Bible, who is considered a wise king and who had the letters B and J written on the columns in his temple. We don't have the B and J here, but you'll see those on more traditional decks. Great updates include her footwear and, of course, this very cool computer. Normally she's holding a scroll that says Torah if you read it from left to right, or Tarot if you read it from right to left. Let's keep going. The Empress represents the idea of being a mother. This isn't always literal, it can be more symbolic. And so think of somebody who's very nurturing and cares about creating environments where people thrive. Specifically, think more about this card representing the womb rather than being a woman, being a mother. The womb allows life to grow and nourishes it. Here, we see her in a position of comfort. She has everything that she needs. She's regal. She's at ease. And our sigil of Venus represents her strong feminine power. The High Priestess can represent the dark side of the divine feminine. The Empress represents the light side. In traditional religions from the East, these two qualities are often seen together in a goddess. But in Western religions, these are often split. So Mother Mary in Catholicism is the representation of life, and then you have characters like Lilith that represents the dark side of the feminine. You really don't see those two characters put together often. The water from the High Priestess comes through into this card as well. I love that they included that, even though you don't see the water in the High Priestess, but traditionally this is a connection between the two cards. And this water is starting to get agitated and mix up, which means that this sense of creativity is present, and it's a reminder that to make an omelet, you have to break some eggs. And so our Empress can represent that moment of creation where you need to mix things up and try to come up with something new. But ultimately, she represents growth, nourishment, and the ability to incubate an idea and bring it to fruition. Our Emperor is a representation of discipline and structure and authority. Some of the great symbols added in this deck are the ram horns on top. Traditionally, we'd see them on the throne itself, but it reminds us that sometimes you have to be really hard-headed to get your way. The toxic side of this card is that, of course, we can get too aggressive when we want to see things happen our way, but the beneficial side is to remember that we always need a little bit of structure to grow. So if the Empress is like the vine that's growing with all of the, or let's say if the Empress is the environment that allows a plant to grow, and she represents the gardener that's cultivating it, the sun, the rain, the soil, the nutrients. Well, the Emperor might be the trellis on which the vine or the plant can grow on. So that's where we get this idea of structure. Traditionally, there's always this city in the background. Sometimes they'll fight for what they really want, and sometimes they're willing to torch their own city in order to be in control of things. I really like how this character has a pantsuit on, and I love seeing a woman on this throne because we don't get to see that often enough. The Hierophant is a card about being a mentor or a teacher to others, and in time, also being a student, because the best teachers are also students, and the best students are teachers, because sometimes you learn by teaching, and sometimes you need to humble your own ego and think about what you need to learn and practice next. It's a cycle that continues. The keys of wisdom are at her feet. She's making the sign of the benediction a blessing. Traditionally, this card was the Pope, and then slowly the symbolism changed. They've taken out some of the details on the columns that would kind of be more religious. They've taken out the staff that she used to hold and the hat when he was a man. It was a pope. So slowly it's becoming less religious. Arthur-Waite took out a lot of the religious iconography, but that benediction is still kind of telling you about the historical component of this card. And then if you look down at these shirts, they're roses, and traditionally these are lilies on the tunic of this acolyte. Here it looks more like random flowers, but the roses and lilies are two religious symbols, and you see them as a motif that consistently appear throughout the Rider-Waite-Smith cards. So here you see a little update on that symbolism. The Lovers cards, it represents passion and inspiration. Think less about this representing a romantic relationship and think more about the moment of being in love. I like to remember the feeling I get when a barista gives me coffee for free, because that's always the highlight of my day, and it just makes me feel like I can go take on the world. But it's temporary. It's going to disappear after I start going through my emails and remembering how tedious life can get. The Lovers is a relationship that goes high and low, up and down. It's a roller coaster, full of temporary experiences, but definitely full of extremes of the good and the challenging. So I like how this card still keeps the triad of the two characters with the angel on top, but some elements that are kind of missing or shifted is that traditionally this is Adam and Eve, and then we have an angel that's trying to bring them together. And the symbolism there was that Adam represented the head, Eve represented the heart, and when the head and heart are in harmony, it allows you to create a bridge and access a more divine part of yourself and striving up towards that ideal. So I like to remember that when it comes to the Lovers card. And the This one has some nice changes, but yeah, that's what it means. The Chariot. The card represents ambition and drive. Makes a lot of sense with a motorcycle now. But traditionally, this is an actual chariot. Before these were sphinxes, they were horses. And so the chariot would need to really pick up the reins and decide where these horses are pointing so that they can take their potential and really make it happen, whatever it is that they want to focus on. So if these horses go in two opposite directions, the chariot goes nowhere, but if the charioteer decides to direct the horses, they'll achieve and get to where they want to go. I always think it's kind of strange to have these horses present when we actually have a motorcycle instead of a chariot, because it doesn't really communicate that message for us. But I like the idea of a badass chick with a leather coat who's on a motorcycle, because you get that vroom vroom energy, and she looks like she's ready to take off. The Strength card represents a fierce self-reliance. Traditionally, the lion represented the lower three chakras. Oh, look, it matches my nail color. And this character, the maiden, represents the upper three chakras. So it would be integrating this Eastern philosophy, which in the early 1900s was extremely esoteric and strange. Now it feels much more commonplace, and it's a more understood body of knowledge. It's more common in the West, for sure. But this was kind of their representation of these animalistic traits about survival and getting those basic needs met, and then pairing that with diplomacy and wisdom and your ability to speak for yourself or connect to the divine. The upper three chakras and the lower three chakras meet at the heart, which is the seventh chakra that allows us to express our intention into the world with love. You'll also notice that we have the roses on the bodies of our two characters. This represents having the tools you need within yourself instead of on the borders of the card like what we had with the Magician. The Hermit is a card that doesn't represent being alone. It represents knowing where you're taking yourself. Hermits were not shut-ins. They didn't close out the external world because they were afraid of it. But that's often how people interpret it today, because that's what the word hermit means. Rather, I encourage us to think about the hermit as somebody who is a lone wolf. Like the Robert Frost poem says, I came to a fork in the road and I took the path less traveled. That's the path that the hermit would choose. They trust their own inner light can guide them. She's closing this laptop, closing her source of influence in order to pursue what she feels is right for herself. Don't be afraid to have those moments yourself. If you need to go screens down or take a solo trip somewhere, maybe you really do need to listen to your voice, listen to your calling, and maybe you're ready to go blaze a trail that other people will follow later. I like this representation because she's barefoot, it's kind of dark, it seems like she's in a space of peace, and I like how she's really tuning in to herself. If you look at the Wheel of Fortune and immediately think, ugh, that's confusing, then you're looking at this card right. It's meant to be confusing. In the Rider-Waite-Smith, the foreground was always the present moment, and the background is the future. So with our Wheel of Fortune, everything that's going on is in the foreground, preventing us from seeing the future. It feels a little bit discombobulating. That's because the message of this card is that we're not supposed to know what's going to happen next in life. Sometimes we need to surrender control, acknowledge that we can't control everything, and just take things one step at a time instead of trying to figure out the entire life plan for ourselves. A lot of these symbols have esoteric meanings. We have I believe they're the cardinal signs of the zodiac. You have your English word for tarot if you go around clockwise, and if you go counterclockwise, it'll spell Torah. And then we have Hebrew letters that spell the name of God, Yahweh. And then inside we have inside the wheel we have the alchemical symbols for the 4 elements. And on the outside, traditionally we have Egyptian gods, but instead these are replaced with people. The Justice card represents doing what's fun, even if it's not fair, and following the rules that are necessary. If you remember our High Priestess, she also had a similar sort of screen or a partition behind her, but we could see through it on the sides. Here, it's fully blocking. So in the High Priestess card, that access to the background represented access to the subconscious. In Justice, that block is a reminder to stay in the conscious mind. Make your rules and enforce them. Follow the rules that you've agreed on, the ones that your society has agreed on. And if you dislike them, then engage in discourse to change them. So it's a reminder to be an activist. It's a reminder to make the rules that help you live the life you want. If you run a business, you have to live by the rules that your government puts on you to pay your taxes, but you can make your own agreements with your clients. And so make sure that you're both recognizing where you get to make the rules, where you have to comply to them, and when you can be an activist and fight for justice and equality and balance in society by changing those rules at large. The Hanged One is typically called the Hanged Man. This title is more gender neutral because this deck does have all female and non-binary people represented in it. This card itself is really cute with the fishnets. I adore it. I'm totally wanting to copy this outfit at some point. I love that they kept the nimbus here. It represents a sense of enlightenment. It's that halo that we see around the saints' heads. Some people say that this tree that the character is hanging on is the Ankh, representing the flow of life, the ancient Egyptian symbol for that. But the shape of the character themselves is a callback to how traitors used to be hanged in Italy. If a traitor or a thief escaped before they were caught, then whoever they stole the money from would often pay for a portrait of them to be painted in the town square, and they would be portrayed in this shape as a way to embarrass them. And so this card traditionally represents someone who's being treated as a martyr, who people turned against, and there's nothing they can do about it, and so they just have to sort of wait until the group understands the truth, and then they'll come down and let the individual down. But I think the best modern interpretations is about patience and letting things pass and letting yourself be comfortable even in an uncomfortable situation. Stop struggling against what you stop struggling to make things go faster, and just be really present where you are. Don't wish a moment of your life away by saying, oh, I can't wait till this is over. No. Appreciate every moment that you have, even if it's not always the most ideal moment, because that's oftentimes when life is happening. It's not always comfortable, so stay present with it, stay engaged. Our Death card represents metamorphosis and transformation. Think of it as more of an ego death than anything else. For centuries, this card was a representation of the Black Plague, and that's what this Reaper represented. Moving through the deck, it reminds us that this is a temporary moment. It's moving through the card, I should say. And we also have this river back here, which reminds us again about things flowing forward. The best way to handle change is to not resist it. Our king had the most rigid ego, so he fell. This person is traditionally a clergy individual, a member of the clergy, and their robes would actually hold them up and fortify them. So it was their dogmatic practices that gave them the ability to stand up to this change. The maiden, she's doing okay, but not great, but it's really the child who's the most humble and the most open, that is able to look at change or death in the face and say, all right, let's do this. So it's kind of a reminder to have that adaptability and a reminder that change comes for everyone. And it's really not comfortable for most of us. What's interesting is these pillars represent a great passing of time. It's been that for hundreds of years. And that sunrise is a reminder that if you can get through the tough time now, there's a sunrise in the future, a chance to be reborn, a new part of yourself coming through. And so that symbol is here. We're going to see it missing in a card later on. And I'm not sure if the artist did that intentionally or not. And this flag is typically a Rosicrucian cross. The artist switched it out to be a white flower. And I don't know if that was intentional or not. I don't know if there's symbolism behind that specifically. Temperance features an angel, and it represents balance, finding the middle way. She's pouring the water back and forth between the cups, finding the right equilibrium, which takes an adjustment each day. We see this trail that's moving out towards this background. Typically, there's a little crown over that sun, which again represents the success of you accessing a higher part of your intelligence and your consciousness, that after you go through this ego death, you're able to then have a new life. Over here, our flowers are changed. Traditionally, these are irises. The irises represented the goddess Iris, who is a connection between mortals and gods. Iris rode the rainbow between the heavens and the earth to bridge communication between the two. Here, it looks like they're replaced with sunflowers. I don't know for sure if that was intentional. But these red wings always represent a sense of strength and power and protection, and a reminder to find your balance, advocate for yourself, and find that sense of peace and healing in the process. The Devil card has the same composition as the Lover's card. And traditionally, it's the same characters. So here, these are different characters than the Lover's card, but they used to be Adam and Eve. And so there's a bit of a theological story that was being told here with the characters. This individual representing the devil is actually called Baphomet. This is not, I don't know if I'd call this a depiction of Baphomet, but that's originally who would be sitting here on this block. And that is a goat-headed god that represents equality between the sexes. And our inverted pentagram is a common symbol on this card because it's a reminder of the human body and the importance of appreciating the body over the mind. So if you look at the symbolism here, our star, when it's upright, has the head at the top, then 2 arms and 2 legs. So when it's inverted, it represents the body being appreciated over the mind. And the Devil card represents that type of indulgence, listening to what the body needs rather than trying to act like you're some divine creature that's going to do everything right. After we come through this Temperance card, it kind of kicks us in the teeth and says, well, we're working on being better, but we still have our moments when we need to acknowledge our base instincts and our innate humanness. The Tower card is pretty true to the original drawing of the Rider-Waite-Smith and previous illustrations. The card represents destruction and the need for us to tear down old structures that we built in order to remodel them and make something that better suits our life, our needs, and our situation. This thunderbolt is divine intervention. Sometimes we ignore a change that needs to happen until the change happens to us, and it's less within our control. So the thunderbolt is the catalyzing or instigating force that caused change. This giant crown coming off the tower is a reminder that it humbles us to get hit like this. It's common to have people falling out of the tower in this depiction, but I have never seen a card that actually had a person impaled on the rocks. It's a really graphic representation, but I find it funny because of all the card decks that I've seen. I forget that when I turn this over for a client that's never seen this card before, they're literally shocked and they're scared. So I always have to make a little extra space to talk about this symbolism before we talk about how it applies to an individual's life. The Star card represents being authentic. I love that this card has represented what RuPaul still says to this day, which is we're all born naked, the rest is drag. All of our other characters are clothed, except for a few in the Sun, traditionally the Lovers, the Devil card. So our Star is about remembering who you actually are and peeling off the layers of identity that you put on in order to fit in with certain groups of people. Clothing is a way that we fit in to our community. It's a way we signal what our values are or what we're doing or what our identity is. We have water being poured out, which represents a sense of consciousness flowing. We have a really peaceful and serene scene, and this individual is feeling safe and comfortable in her skin. The update on this card that I adore is that she has the body of a normal-sized woman, and I just think it's a really beautiful body neutral representation of femininity, and I wish we could see more of this in the world. The Moon card makes quite a few changes, but it still gets the big message across. Traditionally, the Moon card represents reflection. Reflecting on who you are, asking questions about that, and going on a journey to discover your true self. But remembering that that journey is something that we never finish. You'll never really understand yourself because every day as you age and as you meet new people, you're changing and you're adapting. Typically, we have this crayfish coming out of the water. Here it's replaced with this kind of creepy goblin-like character. But again, it's something emerging from the subconscious that may or may not be pretty, so I kind of like that element. It works for me. The path is a reminder that it goes on for a long time. Normally we have pillars here, like we have in the Death card. And it reminds us that there are years that go by where we're either being introspective or maybe a reminder that even when we're 70, we need to be curious about who we are. Typically, instead of people, we see a wolf and a dog. Those two creatures represent the tame side of ourselves and the feral side. Depending on what's going on, you might meet one versus the other. Our moon shows us a different side of her face every night, but she's just one big rock in the sky. So I like that we kept this symbolism, or that symbolism of the different faces of the moon and the different stages of the moon, because it reminds us that we have so many sides of ourselves to explore, and as something new comes to light out of the darkness, we have a chance to embrace it and observe it, and hopefully we'll take that opportunity and not judge what we find and not judge what we think it means that we understand that about ourselves. So it's a reminder to do that introspection and that self-investigation. Wrapping up the three celestial bodies that are integrated in the tarot cards, our Sun is about expanding beyond your borders and being bold. It can also represent trusting your initial thoughts and reactions because the Sun is the source of energy. In many countries and in many cultures, the moment of enlightenment is described as a bright flash of light, that connection to the divine, that connection to God. And so the Sun represents that because the Sun is the source of light in our universe, whereas the moon is the reflection, which can cause distortion sometimes as we try to figure out what's true and what's our perspective versus reality. So the Sun card does a great job of keeping to the traditional imagery of this inner child being free to break out of the garden wall that was in our mind, kind of keeping that inner child safe, but also sequestered. And they're on a horse because they're ready to get out and see what's out there in the world and spread out, be themselves. And the flag here represents having a sense of legacy, knowing that what you're doing now will last in the long term. The Judgment card represents Judgment Day. This is the opportunity for people to rise up and become a better version of themselves. Typically, this is not a flag, it's actually a trumpet. And so think of it as hearing a higher calling. That's what that Judgment card represents. Now that you know better, you can do better. It's the moment of epiphany, when you realize what you need to change in your life so you can become the next and better version of yourself and leave the old life behind. I love that we do have so many characters that are rejoicing for this opportunity and this connection. I always recommend that as a reader, you don't interpret this literally, because that's such a trivial and a small message, or interpretation, I should say, when really Judgment Day is about understanding how you can be better than who you are now. It's not about being judgmental. And our world replicates a lot of the same symbolism we have in the Wheel of Fortune card, where we still have our cardinal symbols on the outside, the cardinal zodiac signs. And then we have the idea of coming full circle with the sense of victory, which is what that laurel wreath represents. The infinity signs is the sense of continuation. The character is mostly nude, but she's able to sort of play with this fabric and choose what she shows to people, how she portrays herself. And then traditionally, these are actually scrolls, not wands. The same thing was switched out in the Magician card. And here, I guess, the wands might represent her access to power. I'd have to ask the artist. But usually those scrolls represent wisdom. And so it could be a plan, it could be a blueprint, it could be formulas and recipes. But essentially, it's kind of like the fruit of your study and your practice is that you gain this knowledge and wisdom as a result. So that is our major arcana cards. Now let's check out the minor arcana cards. We're going to start with the suit of wands. The Ace of Wands represents having a spark of inspiration. The yods are no longer just these bits of light that we see traditionally. Instead, they're the actual leaves of the wand. But we have this kind of halo to give us that sense of inspiration and even divinity. And we have this hand holding the wand with an amazing manicure. So I'm kind of into this modern representation. The next card is our Two of Wands, and it represents whoever had that great idea beginning to plan and patiently doing so. On this balcony, they're kind of looking out at all the different routes they could take, the different terrains they could cover to get where they want to go. Traditionally, we see a globe in the character's hand, meaning they hold the world in their hands. But here it's a cell phone, which is maybe a more effective modern symbol. And I like that they keep this idea of the different terrains, because it's true there's usually more than one place to get to. There's more than one way to get to your destination. And it's important to have all those backup plans before you start the journey and get in the middle of it all. Our Three of Wands represents collaboration. This character is traditionally the merchant that's ready to put the business plan into action, and they're ready to expand to this other shore. And so the character is needing to build relationships with the captains of the ship to get there. Here, maybe it doesn't make sense for why this girl would want to get to the other side, but I do like that they kept this original composition. Our Four of Wands is a celebration of stability, consistency, and foundations. This represents celebration. 4 is a very stable number, and these two people have come away from the city in order to celebrate their connection, their union, whatever it is they choose to celebrate. This is traditionally a wedding card, and typically we see people coming out of the city in a procession to celebrate with them. And so it speaks to, if it's not a wedding, at least it's a planned event, something like a calendar holiday, where you would leave your normal systems in the city, take the day off to come and enjoy a special moment. The Five of Wands is a card that represents being in a tangle or having a little bit of drama. No one's getting hurt, but also no one's making progress. There's some really curious costumes here. These face masks were drawn and included in this card before the 2020 pandemic and public health crisis. And so I'm not exactly sure what these characters are representing, like with the fashion choices, but traditionally it's kids that are kind of hitting each other with these sticks. Maybe they're playing, maybe they're fighting. In the modern day, I always think it's a good representation of what it feels like to try to date online, or it's just a hot mess and it's confusing. But sometimes you have to go through that tangle to figure out the path forward. Other times, this card is a reminder you can like avoid that mess. So just keep that in mind as you look at this card, and I hope one day I'll understand what all these costumes mean for this particular deck. The Six of Swords is a reminder to understand how you define victory. This character on the horse is being cheered on by people in the parade. So the message originally was that this was like a prince or a soldier coming home and being celebrated by their hometown. But as you can see in this card, the character is not looking at the parade, nor is the horse. They're both looking ahead because this person is not satisfied with their success so far. And just because people around them are happy for him, it doesn't mean this person's going to quit here. They are choosing where they move towards next. So this is an encouragement to stay in tune with what really feels important to you. And we got to do a little shout out to these ripped jeans because they look amazing on her. The Seven of Wands is about setting some strong boundaries with others and enforcing them. The character has the higher ground. Typically, the character is fighting off whoever is down here holding these wands. So I like to remember that it's a sign to be a bouncer in your life. Decide who's coming into the club and who has to stay outside. If they're coming in, they have to agree to play by your rules. If they won't, they stay on the outside. This character is engaging with the individuals. It's not like a complete blockade. It's really more of an engagement and a filter to find the right people who are allies and let them through. The Eight of Wands is about moving forward and making progress. This character is on a motorcycle, so like this road tripping idea definitely does have that type of momentum. But these wands always tend to confuse people, especially here, because like, why are they in the sky? Really, the message overall is to just keep moving. Just keep going. Don't look down, don't look back, and embrace new opportunities as they arise. Because sometimes we had to get ourselves out the door with a plan of how our trip was going to be. But once we're on the road or once we're in action, things change. And so see where you're feeling led, see where the journey is taking you, and just don't be too obsessed with a particular outcome or a destination. Typically, you're not going to see a bullseye target down here on the card because we don't know what we're aiming towards. The goal has changed since the journey started. So see where things are trying to take you. Our Nine of Wands is about fatigue. The character is tired out and she's holding herself up on this wand. This is a bandage around her head. She has bandages on her hands. She looks like she's a gymnast or maybe a boxer. And she's taking a moment to re-strategize what she's doing next. This really replicates the original card pretty well, but she definitely has better thighs than the original character in the 1909 Rider-Waite-Smith version. The Ten of Wands is a character who's pushing forward and really the character is doing too much. In the Ten of Wands, our character is just doing too much. Doesn't mean it's a bad thing, but there's no 11 of Wands, so this is a maximum. She has a pretty heavy load in her arms, but she's on her feet and pushing them forward. Sometimes we risk losing our sight of the road when we're so busy with what we're trying to push forward. So it's a reminder to stay in tune with your why if you're picking up all these projects. But more important is knowing when you can pass these projects off. This is typically representing a person with a lot of ambition and firepower and willpower. And so they're likely to say yes to more projects, and we don't want them to burn out. So imagine that these wands are batons. And if you're a person that says yes to a lot of projects, also clarify how far you need to take them before you pass them off. That way you can keep kind of a flow of projects that you're passionate about that give you energy, and it gives you a chance to clear the plate once in a while to embrace the new projects you want to focus on. Our Page of Wands is a very curious character, willing to go adventure and explore. Traditionally, these characters were Italian, so having pyramids in the background was them being in Egypt, and it represented their ability to travel. And we only see the pyramids in the court cards of the wands. Here, it seems like that symbolism was a little bit softened, and I don't think these characters seem to me like they're Italian. The creator is American, but I think she's still referencing those pyramids, and if you're wondering why they're there, now you know. Our Knight of Wands traditionally represents flamboyance because you have like a big feather in the cap and kind of a showy costume. I don't get that vibe from these fashion choices, but I often associate flamboyance, being in the spotlight, wanting to be seen with our Knight of Wands. Our Queen of Wands is all about confidence. Queens are leaders and they lead by example. So here the character is typically sitting up straight and traditionally her knees are spread wide, representing her taking up space. Here, unfortunately, her legs are crossed, which is very feminine, very dainty. Since the original card that I'm referencing was from 1909, having the knees spread wide in the Victorian era in England was quite the statement by the female artist about a woman taking up her space. I'm sad that we missed that here in the card, but at least a lot of the other symbolism is there, and she still has an excellent expression on her face looking forward. So she still communicates that confidence, and it's a reminder to really embody that and let your personality show, even if it's a little spicy at times. We love that. Our King of Wands is very motivating to other people, and they lead people by getting others excited about what they can do. There used to be a little salamander down here, and that's because salamanders were once associated with fire, but that was a misunderstanding when people thought that salamanders were born of fire, when in fact they simply saw salamanders in fire because they were burning the logs in which the amphibious creatures lived, and the salamanders were trying to escape and save their own lives. So I'm kind of happy that they took out those salamanders for modern decks, but we still see a little reference there. Suspenders are fabulous. It's strange to see the character around such rocky terrain because they're actually like a really supportive character. But at the end of the day, I think the colors are on point and the character's posture is very strong and they look ready for action. Now we're into the cups. The Ace of Cups represents emotional fulfillment. We see a heart here instead of a dove. This is a much more accessible symbol for people that aren't religious and don't understand what the dove may have represented in the past. They also took off the traditional W that was here, which was actually an M upside down. And there's also one less stream of water. And the yods now are bits of water. So I think this is a good modernized version of the card, and I like that they left in these lily pads representing the life and abundance that occurs when we have our hearts full and when we're sharing our emotional energy with others. The Two of Cups represents equality and building a relationship from which comes strength and victory. So this is an old Italian symbol, that lion with the wings, and it represents victory. Our Caduceus is the Greek symbol of healing, and it's the union of these two individuals that bring that healing. A lot of people will think that in the traditional cards, it's a man and woman coming together. So I like here that not only do we have two girls, but it feels like it's about friendship and really having your heart involved in a situation that will lead you to that success of victory and healing. So I like that these two friends are meeting. Well, I guess they could be more than friends, but I like this. The Three of Cups typically represents getting together with friends and building relationships when times are good. And here, one of the characters is in festival gear. I guess all of them are. So it's a reminder to make the most of the moments you have with your friends wherever you may find them. Oh yeah, and you can even see the tents in the background, so it feels like they're definitely at some type of a music festival. Very modern symbol. The Four of Cups represents tuning into your gut instinct instead of talking yourself into things you don't want. Her shirt literally says over it, and I like that it captions the expression on her face and explains what's going on in her head. So it's a great reminder to appreciate what you have and don't feel pressured to say yes to something that is not the right choice for you. Listen to that sigh within or that hesitation when it appears. Our Five of Cups is about emotional processing. Not much here has changed from the original card. It's a reminder that it's important to embrace the bad with the good. And the character is taking time to process what she's grieving, but then she'll turn around and appreciate the beauty of life, which exists simultaneously. She's also alone right now, but she has the access to go back over the bridge and connect to the people that she loves and get help in her community. So this card is still really relatable even to this day. Our Six of Cups traditionally featured two children and all the cups were full, which represents embracing the sweet things in life and letting your inner child connect to someone else's inner child, making sure you're in a safe environment where those relationships can be built. Having an adult here instead changes that dynamic quite a lot. I would interpret it as an adult connecting to her inner child, almost a moment of reparenting. I think these are the same person, just at different stages of their life. So if you've been doing any inner child work and this card comes up, this is a reminder to continue creating that safe space, give gifts to that inner child, and stay tuned in to that character. The Seven of Cups represents seeing all these possibilities out there in the world. If anyone is watching this and has ADHD or is neurodivergent, you might experience this type of creative brainstorming that feels more like a creative hurricane at times. You might be overwhelmed by all these options in front of you and maybe even have analysis paralysis at times. But ultimately, this card reminds us to really choose what's real and what's just a nice idea or what's an illusion. That's why everything is up here in the clouds. It all looks good, but we need to know what's a real possibility. It's good to have a divergent mindset as you're considering new options and ideas, but then we want to be able to choose our best options. The Eight of Cups represents letting go of something that's been working well, but isn't the right fit anymore. So all of this symbolism is really true to our original cards, except we're missing a little face here up in the moon. Typically that moon tells us how the character is feeling. So if you haven't seen the original Rider-Waite-Smith, just remember that it can be hard to say goodbye to something that you loved, but it's important to do that one step at a time as you move on and open your heart, open your mind, open space in your life to whatever could be next in the rugged terrain of the unknown. Our Nine of Cups often represents contentment, but we're missing some symbols here that I really love about the old representation of this card, because this character is sitting here with her arms crossed and these cups behind her, but we don't get a strong sense of who she is. Traditionally, the character has this really fancy hat showing off her wealth. We could assume that's her tutu, I'm into that, but they sit on a handmade bench, something very simple. And it proves that the individual is content with the simple things in life. Here is like a really nice stone bench, which seems, artisanal. So maybe it's more of a feeling that she's really happy with what she has and she doesn't feel the need to budge or to move or to do something different. One of the secondary meanings I've applied to this card is sometimes we need to get out of our comfort zone. The Ten of Cups is about appreciating your vision, knowing what it is that you want for yourself and having the courage to speak it out loud, put it into a vision board, write about it. If you can believe in it, you can make it happen. So have pride in what it is you see for yourself. That's what that rainbow represents with that sense of fulfillment with those cups up there. Let's now look at the court cards. Our Page of Cups is a very playful and goofy character. They kept in this original fish, which harkens back to an old folk tale. And we have all this water because the character can go with the flow. I only wish the background could have been a brighter color. The Knight of Cups is our hopeless romantic of the deck. This one looks a little bit depressed, I'm not gonna lie. But it's usually a card about being courageous as you move forward and follow your heart and believe in your ideas of romance, the idea of what you're in love with and want to dedicate your heart to. Very tough position to be in, but some people go all the way, and those are the Don Quixotes of the world. So I like this card a lot, and I think it's a pretty cute character. Our Queen of Cups. Here, she's very in tune with the cup, and it's like she really appreciates it. The card represents being empathic and being able to hit your own flow state. This water is a little intense, but it does come up to her dress, which is a reminder of her connection to her subconscious mind. And this is often associated, in my mind, with artists and people that can really emote a feeling through their work. I like how she's engaged with what she's working on with this cup, and it feels like she's very in tune with her environment. The King of Cups is the master of their emotions. Even with all of the crazy swirling emotions around them represented by the water, they have a nice sturdy platform on which they can sit and be stable because they've done the work to get there. Let's talk about our swords. The Ace of Swords is about getting a handle on a situation. We do have our traditional yads here and an interesting extra smoke signal that's kind of intertwining or wrapping around the blade. So it's about cutting through confusion and getting a good sense of clarity. Our Two of Swords is about tuning in to yourself and not letting other people pass through you. So this character is tuning into her subconscious mind, and she's making a conscious effort to block out influences that she doesn't want impeding her own connection to self. All of this is very traditional symbolism. I wouldn't change a thing. The Three of Swords has always featured these three swords with the storm behind the heart. And this stretches back to a deck that Pamela Coleman Smith referenced before she created her deck in 1909. What's really weird here is that we have black instead of red blood. I've never seen blood on this card before, but it's interesting that it's black of all things. The card overall is a reminder to let the emotional storms pass through and to take care of your mind so that it doesn't inflame or make your emotional state worse. The Four of Swords is about rest and recovery. Traditionally, it occurs in a church, which is like a sanctuary where people can heal. The swords are traditionally up on the wall because it represents somebody who's achieved battles and won battles in the past. The soldier is lying down and healing and resting in this safe place with another sword underneath them, reminding the reader that sometimes after you take a rest, you can figure out what your next best move is, like you have a secret weapon. Here, our character does not seem to be getting good rest. And in the modern day, none of us sleep with swords in this position over our bed. So when we see it, it's kind of jarring. It seems like she's in danger. And so I don't love we have these swords here, but that's why. That's the historical reasoning. Our Five of Swords is about speaking one's truth, even if other people don't want to hear it. The Six of Swords is about moving from a hard time to an easier time, which is represented by having waves down here in the corner and smooth water over here. The Seven of Swords is a character that's choosing what she shares and what she leaves behind. Again, it's kind of strange to have these swords appearing in such a contemporary modern setting. Traditionally, this was a young boy who was essentially a page or an assistant to knights, and the knights are intense over here. So That's why you have this medieval imagery here by modern apartment buildings. Our Eight of Swords is missing something here that I wish was added. This character is uncomfortable and they're surrounded by a ring of their own thoughts represented by swords, when really if they wanted to, they could get out of those bonds, get out of those thoughts, and go up to the comfort of the castle on the hill. Here we don't really see that comfortable promise, but we do see a city in the background. The Nine of Swords is our card of sleepless nights. It represents anxiety and stress. Traditionally, this doesn't have roses on it. The actual blanket has zodiac signs, but I think this still communicates the message well of what's bothering the individual and that they're just having a tough night. It's a really relatable card. The Ten of Swords is a feeling of overwhelm. The character has hit rock bottom. It's pretty intense to have this sword going into her neck, but I always find it funny to see this cell phone because the revenge procrastinating is real, and I imagine that this character is scrolling through TikTok or Instagram just trying to escape the reality of the pain she's going through. Very relatable. One thing that is missing here is there's typically a sunrise on the horizon, which reminds us that it's time to sort of wipe the slate clean and start fresh and wake up tomorrow for a new day. Here, this feels a little more painful because there's no promise of what could come next. And in this deck, there's an extra 10 of Swords with the title Everything is Fine. Just a reminder that when we say everything is fine, usually we're not okay. And so this is a great kind of chuckle to have because this is such a relatable experience that we need to talk about when we're going through it. And this can really help start a good conversation about that. Our Page of Swords is a character who's light on her feet and nimble in her mind. The Knight of Swords moves swiftly, sometimes recklessly, but I also see this as a knight in shining armor. Our Queen of Swords shows us one side of herself. We don't really get to see her heart. We only get to see her logical side and those amazing boots. The King of Swords is a character that's very good at delegating and strategizing. They're good at organizing plans and making other people do them. Love seeing the pantsuit here. Moving into the Suit of Pentacles, the Ace of Pentacles is about having a promising start in the material world. The Two of Pentacles is about multitasking. Typically, we have a tall hat on the character representing how they can do many things at one time. Here we have a woman's hair, and so it kind of works, but we kind of lose that symbolism with the hat. But that's okay. You can still remember what this card represents. The Three of Pentacles is about recognition and reward. What I like about this depiction is that whether you're the model, the artist, or the teacher, all of these three people can be the best at their craft. And so being good at something isn't reserved now just for a master artisan. I think there's more appreciation for skill sets in different industries and different places. The Four of Pentacles is the mindset of instability, feeling like we don't have enough and needing to get down to basics and really budget our resources. In this puffer coat, I like to think of the card as Bernie Sanders when he was at the inauguration with the manila envelope and the mittens. So it's the same type of mindset of just wanting to use resources really well, and I hope that makes the card a little more accessible. Our Five of Pentacles is the feeling of being in the world but not of it. Traditionally, you would see the characters on crutches with a bell around their necks, which represented they were lepers. In Renaissance society, they were very ostracized. Here we just see two girls walking through the snow, so it's not quite as dramatic as that original Renaissance imagery, but it still does communicate the feeling of being left out in the cold. The Six of Pentacles is about an exchange. The characters are figuring out the right balance of how they're giving and receiving of their resources. Traditionally, these are beggars, and this is like a wealthy merchant. And you could tell that from the differences in their clothing. Here, you don't see that as clearly. And so it's not communicated quite as well. But I do like that we have gifts because it does speak to this act of giving. Our Seven of Pentacles is about reflecting on if what you've been investing in has been paying off. Back in the day, it was a potato plant. And so with potatoes, even though you don't see the potato above ground, you do get a sense of the fruit that is born of your labor. And here it's like, what is that, a monstera? Monsteras don't have fruit on them. So they definitely capture the modern houseplant life, but the pentacles were a bit of a stretch on them. But that's kind of why they're included there, if you're wondering. The Eight of Pentacles is about someone getting better at their craft. This is a great representation because with something like drawing, you really do just have to keep going and keep iterating to improve. So it's a reminder to keep building the skill set, just project after project. Traditionally, it was somebody literally making pentacles and then posting them up on a tree. So here you just have to sort of imagine these are like sketches or projects that she's drawn. It's kind of strange to have them shaped this way, but now you know why. Our Nine of Pentacles is about a woman who feels very confident in what she's achieved for herself. So the character has built her own estate. We're missing some key symbols here that really help. The first is that here we have tomato plants growing. Tomatoes die at the end of every season. They're not a perennial that come back. Traditionally, it was grapes in the background, and grapes are known for getting better with each season. And so it shows the payoff of contributing to these growing cycles and staying consistent with your efforts over time. Also, there's usually a little snail down in the corner, and it's a representation of making progress that might feel slow, but that is actually meaningful. We also have this bird up here. The bird that used to be in this card was a representation of a character that had a control of the material world around her. And so it was a hawk with a hood, which is, one of those old sports done by wealthy people, falconry, where they could train an animal that was really quite wild and work with that animal. So here we just see a sparrow sitting on her hat. It's just kind of a strange placement, if you ask me. And then I don't know why she's holding carrots, but she's holding carrots. Again, another a non-perennial. With these pentacles, the one thing I really do like is her hand is on the pentacle, and so there's a sense that she has the world under her control. That's a classic symbol, and I'm glad it stayed. Our 10 of Pentacles represents multi-generational guidance. I like that we have these extra stars around this older person here. Dogs represent that pedigree and heritage, and then all of these pentacles are in the shape of the tree of life, which is why they seem kind of weirdly placed, but there you go. And we do see the family at their home. We don't see quite the same family crest that represented history and lineage, but we still get the sense of their connection. And then moving into court cards, our Page of Pentacles is willing to learn a new skill and is curious about the lessons at hand. The Knight of Pentacles can be a bit of a stick in the mud. They can be a bit stubborn, but they can also be very loyal, dependable, and consistent. The Queen of Pentacles is very nurturing, but more hands-on than the Empress. And as a reminder with those roses, she really uses the resources around her well. She's taking good, loving care of that pentacle. And lastly, our King of Pentacles is a character that is very comfortable with how they use resources, and they create self-sustaining systems so that a city can grow, for instance, or a household can be taken care of. So this is the type of person that really knows how to handle their businesses, use their resources well, and they are at peace with what they're growing. And that's the Modern Witch deck. I hope you enjoyed this walkthrough of the Modern Witch Tarot deck. If you want to learn more about who made it, where it came from, and what my honest thoughts are on how great it is as a deck to use in your personal practice, go look at the review. You can always buy this deck at the link down in the description box. Please like this video and hit subscribe. Follow me on my socials, and I'll see you next time. Happy reading!